Look, it is the straightforwardness, the almost absence of fear, when approaching life and approaching anything. Because really, as a surgeon, you have to have a certain level of absence of fear, because you're going to go in braving, opening somebody up, and you're going to be going very close to very important structures, and you can't be shaking and scared and faced by what you're going to do.
Hi, thank you for joining the LeadUP Podcast. As you might know already by this point in time, that I'm Lennox Fasara and I host the LeadUP Podcast. It is here on this podcast that we speak to a plethora of guests who have been sharing their stories about leadership and their journey and what impact they're making in the world around us. Today's guest is very, very special because it again shows the academic quality and rigor of the University of Pretoria, in that she was the first woman to ever receive a Master of Medicine in Neurology at the University of Pretoria. Her name is Dr. Coceka Mfundisi, who was a specialist neurosurgeon. Her specialization lies in neurotrauma, neuro-oncology, and spinal surgery. Making her the first woman to ever receive this qualification means that today we're in for a real conversation. Dr. Mfundisi continues to make a salient contribution in the discipline, as she's also a practitioner and a researcher. Some of her notable achievements include being a member of the Golden Lions Rugby Club Medical Committee, where she actually serves by being present at international test matches for the Springboks. She's also part of the executive committee of Society of Neurosurgeons in South Africa. Find out more about what leadership looks like in the medical space. Wonderful day to you. Thank you so much for listening in today. Today I'm joined by Dr. Coceka Mfundisi on the LeadUP Podcast. Doc, thank you for making time. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. And it's only a pleasure to be here.
Incredible. More about your journey, because you seem to be somebody who's a true example of somebody who literally, your work is making an impact in people's lives literally every day that you're practicing in multiple ways, actually. How did you actually decide to take this route in your career? How did you end up here?
That dates back to undergrad, So I just had an attraction and fascination with neuro in general, the neurological system, brain and spinal cord. And the disciplines that tend to deal with those systems, there's three disciplines. It's neurosurgery, it's neurology, and also it's psychiatry. And I enjoyed all of them. But the two others are more physician than surgeon, qualifications. But I also just tended to prefer surgery. I just had, I felt that I had the right temperament for that field. And I then was, of course, taking interest. I then asked a registrar, which is a training specialist when I was an undergrad at UCT. And they invited me to come to theatre with them. And I watched them remove a tumor. And I had seen the patient before they went to theatre, and then saw them after the tumor was removed, and I saw the massive change, but in such a quick space of time. Like within 2 days, the patient was much better. And I thought, oh, well, that looks like something I could actually do, because you get this massive operation done, you remove this big tumor, and the person is up and about 2 days later, and they're so much better, so much quicker. So then I thought, oh, wow, that looks like something that I could do, I could try, because really I also like, quick solutions, if I can put it that way. But also, something that actually has gone on even with my life now as practicing as a specialist, that I'm very much interested in early recovery after surgery. So it was a nice thing, a nice exposure for me, to watch that. And after that, I was actually sold. I then decided that is neurosurgery. I'm not doing neurology or psychiatry. I'm going to be a surgeon. So that's basically where it started, and I'm still having fun.
Yeah, indeed. I can tell.
Yeah.
Your face lit up as you're talking about everything that you're doing, which is amazing.
I love cutting people open.
Well, at least in that sense, you're finding solutions with it, so which is good. And people generally feel better after your operations. You spoke just now about temperament, and somebody once mentioned that you had the temperament of a neurosurgeon. What did they see, and what does that mean to you?
Look, it is the straightforwardness, the almost absence of fear, when approaching life and approaching anything. Because really, as a surgeon, you have to have a certain level of absence of fear, because you're gonna go in braving opening somebody up, and you're gonna be going very close to very important structures, and you can't be shaking and scared and faced by what you're gonna do. So I think that that's possibly what they saw, But also, it is a very male-dominated field, and this friend and actually knew that I'm not phased, in a room full of men, so they felt that, look, you're going to be perfectly fine in that environment. So, and I'm also just a practical person, I'm a person of routine and, step 1, step 2, step 3, and those are things that tend to, basically a surgeon really is mostly about, I'm going to get in, this is the tumor, I'm going to position the patient this way, and then I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Literally, you recite that in your brain before you actually go in and do it in theater. So those are the things I think that they had picked up, and those are the things that I agreed, on, that definitely I think that those will go well, that field will go well with my temperament and who I am, And it is actually true, I am enjoying it, I couldn't have done really any other discipline. Initially, like I said to you earlier, I thought it was almost like a quick fix thing,
Yeah.
And then I was exposed to long-term stay in hospital, or some of our patients who are either, seriously injured. Then I'm like, okay, well, not so quick sometimes, but it was a nice challenge, in that then you actually, being forced to slow yourself down. You're being forced by the patient to slow down, that, look, I'm not going to be out of here in 2 days. I'm going to be out of here in 3 weeks or 2 months, So the patient basically dictates the pace. The condition that you are dealing with also dictates the pace of how you're going to treat the patient. So it was a lovely combination in that, I had gone in with this particular thinking, and then the discipline then required something different from me, and I had to adapt, and live within that. Yeah, so a very nice challenge.
Yeah, a good challenge indeed, because I think taking it back to your point about the fact that somebody mentioned that to you and you thought, hey, there must be something here. Those sometimes can be torchbearers, and those people sort of help pave the path for you because they see something within you that you might not always see yourself. So at the time, that person said something very pertinent, which made an impact in your life, and look at the impact you're making in people's lives today. But take us more through other torchbearers who've helped you in your journey thus far.
Sure, it's been a lot. I think that one, it starts from my childhood. I had grown up, I've been raised by a matriarch of our family, Umamicha. She had gone as far as primary school, a housewife, a rural woman, who had been widowed at an early age. So she managed, and she had to, manage her home by herself, and now think of it, rural spaces and our culture in general tends to be very, very unfair to women. So then this becomes the person who raises me, So the very first role models I have around me, are strong women who are running the show and don't fear anything, So I think that then the lack of fear, or rather the limited amount of fear, then starts becoming instilled at that point. Then as I grew up, my aunt was a nurse, and would, she was a nurse here in Gauteng, and would go down to the Eastern Cape for the festive season, and I would interact with her. And, yet again, another person who was reaffirming, I think that the day when the whole idea of medicine was introduced to my brain was when I counted to 100. And then she made such a big, issue out of it. And it's so important in my life that, you cheer on a youngster, you cheer on a developing brain, because when you do cheer them on, they start seeing possibilities for themselves, They start seeing that they actually could be bigger than what they actually think they are, because I'm just thinking I'm just counting to 100. And this person saying, you're actually genius, So I'm like, okay, now I have to reconcile, just ability to count to 100 and being a genius. Maybe really I am it. So that's just for me, the very strong foundation, but also people who they were teaching us discipline. We were, doing subsistence farming in our home. So we would have, fields that need to be planted and all of that. And you should not wake up before the sun goes up. It is a practical thing, because once the sun goes up, of course, it becomes very hot, and you can't be out in the fields when it's very hot, So we had to then wake up, just at dawn, on time, just, the first light comes out, and we go out and assist in the field. We were still very small, so we did menial duties really there. So that was very important. It actually became very handy when I was training here in Pretoria, when the surgical discipline in general requires early starts, because you want your patients to be in theatre at 7 o'clock. So, or at the very latest, you must be cutting by 8 o'clock. So by the time you get to cutting, the patient should have been sleeping and all of that, so should have been anesthetized already. So they need some time to do that. So it was very nice in that, I was not faced by early rising, and it just was a natural thing for me. So those are the first torchbearers. And of course, then I go to university and I come across very talented people. I was fortunate to have been taught by Professor Mayose, the late Professor Mayose in Cape Town. I wrote about this a few weeks ago about, this is a person who's got a PhD from Oxford and was a Nuffield Oxford scholar. So top in their field, and is a physician, a cardiologist at that time. And he comes and teaches third years. Teaches third years how to examine patients. And I am just completely in awe of that, because at that level of your career, generally, you don't want to be interacting with the preclinical years. Most would not be interacting with preclinical years. They prefer, clinical years and postgrad. But here we are being taught by a genius and a leader in their field. But then, he literally has some nuances about how he approaches medicine. And this is, for me, when medicine becomes Africanized. When I start seeing things that I'd seen growing up in the rural areas, coming together and being reconciled with the, so-called Western medicine. I recall once I was sent to examine a patient, and I missed traditional marks on the wrists and some small joints. And then he present the patient to him, as we usually would do in medicine and training. And he says to me, "But Coceka, you missed this and that. This young man had gone to a traditional healer, and the traditional healer did some things. Did you not look at them and think that those marks were important?" And I'm thinking, no, they're just marks. And like, oh, but they are actually in particular positions. They are in small joints. And the condition you are dealing with also presents a joint pain. So now reconcile, traditional marks on small joints and joint pain that goes as part of a condition of a heart condition. And I had missed that, and I realized later on how silly it was that I missed it. I see it now in some of my patients who come in with back pain. They have got, traditional marks in certain parts of the body. So that is when I started, almost like, fusing the African traditional medicine with what I was being taught, which was so-called Western medicine. And then, of course, coming across women who were at that time already like their professorship, or they're going towards their professorship. One of them that is quite significant is Elewani Ramogondo in Cape Town. She was an occupational therapist, but also yet again, comes up with some very interesting nuances around the work that she had done around children and African children and their development, their motor development. So those are some of the people that really, were the torchbearers, so to speak, in my life. And one mirrored me and who I am, and reassured and reaffirmed me to say, look, you actually cut out for it. You can be part of this crew. You can do these things, So those are very important in my life, and I'm eternally grateful that I actually crossed paths with these people. Of course, I cannot mention all of them.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yes.
I like the fusion you talk about African medicine and, you said Western medicine in your words. Is there a lot of work being done to have a look at that arena of medicine, or you feel as though there's still a bit more work that could be done?
Look, there is some work being done, and interestingly, some friends from varsity who have gone on to do their PhDs are actually dedicated, in bringing in African traditional medicine into mainstream. This is the bottom line in our context in Africa. The African traditional medicine is there, and it will always be there, And one must be open to knowing and learning about it for the benefit of their patients. Some of my patients come to me, they've got a brain tumor, and they believe they're bewitched. And whatever I say with my knowledge of neurosurgery and neuroanatomy, it may not be convincing to them, because I don't have the rapport of perhaps a traditional healer that is down the road from their home, who has known them since childhood. Because people, when they are ill, they have got their own perception of what is going on. and they make sense of it in a particular way. And you're going to make sense of it in a particular way that fits within your culture and within your setting. And if then Coceka, who is a neurosurgeon, comes with a very different perception that, no, you are actually not bewitched, you've got a brain tumor. You're not hearing, you're hearing voices because of the brain tumor. They're like, no, I'm hearing voices because I'm bewitched. But if you actually go in there and you fuse their understanding of their disease with your understanding of neurosurgery, you actually have better outcomes in terms of, one, the patient actually agreeing even to your interventions. But also, I would generally be open to some of my patients who want to go and do a traditional healer or go and do a ceremony before a major surgery at home, because whatever heals you, for me, that is my interest, whatever heals you. If what heals you is having gone on at home and done a ceremony before you go to surgery, you feel more reassured, then so be it. Let's then go ahead and do that and then come back to me. We'll schedule the surgery afterwards. And we've got to be such people. We are practicing within this continent where African traditional medicine has been there before, the introduction of our own, skill set of curing. And also generally it's actually that they're just two different skill sets, in terms, and all of them are trying to achieve one thing: curing disease, making a person feel better.
Yeah, indeed. I like the Afrocentrism you bringing to the conversation. It's really lovely to hear that. Moments ago, you mentioned that somebody thought that you're a genius when you counted to 100. And I can certainly tell that they'd seen that sense of you being a genius. And you went on it later to become the first woman to receive a Master in Medicine, Master of Medicine in Neurosurgery. Was that part of the plan, or you literally just did it unknowingly?
Look, it was for me just a practical thing. I needed to have a post to train, and the posts are in certain institutions. They are in one of the 8 institutions that are attached to a university and a tertiary hospital. I then went on to find a post at Pretoria, at Steve Biko, initially as a medical officer. And I get there and I'm the only girl in the team. It was, okay, well, sure, I'm not too surprised because in general, there are not many of us, who are girls in these teams. But there was no intention, that I'm going there because I want to be the first woman. No, it was just, a combination of fortunes, if I could put it that way. So I landed there and then I started training there and I don't quit, because I understand that there had been other women who had gone into the post before, but had left and resigned for many different reasons. So I get there and, I am fine. And of course, I wanted to do neurosurgery. My thing is that I'm going to exit this place when I've got my qualifications, and the qualifications were two qualifications, the FCS, FC Neurosurgery, which is via the Colleges of Medicine in South Africa, which is the national qualification, and then the Master of Medicine as well, which is then through a university, and that is where I then, graduated through UP. So at that time, when I was qualifying, you had to have both qualifications. In the past, you could just have an M.Med and be a neurosurgeon. In the HPCSA, we register you as a neurosurgeon. But from 2011, or anyone who entered a registrar program from 2011 onwards had to have the 2 qualifications in order to be registered by the HPCSA as a specialist.
Yeah. What do you say to yourself in those moments? Because, it's indeed easy for me to hear you saying, I just could not quit. But what were you saying to yourself in those moments where you really felt like quitting? Because, it wasn't a smooth road in any way. Many ups and downs, one imagines. So what do you typically do to keep going?
Look, quitting was never an option. That was just from the start. We don't quit. However hard it's going to be, we don't quit. It was it was training though, and that's the thing, it's training. When you're running, you're training, isn't it? And do you say now that I'm going up a hill and it's so hard and the heart rate is going for your 110%, do you say, no, I can't continue going up this hill? No, you keep going because you are training, because you're intending to run a 21.1, you're intending to run a marathon, you're intending to do whatever. You've got this goal, So you continue. So the same thing, for me, when I was in this scenario where I'm training in Pretoria, and I think that it was useful for myself and for my own well-being to see it as training, because then I know, that training is sometimes painful, but you don't give up, just because it's painful. I also, have a very supportive, partner and husband, who once said to me, I think that was probably one of the days when it was very tough, and perhaps I might have been considering quitting.
Yeah.
He says to me, look, you can decide whether you're going to view all of these things as obstacles or you're going to view them as stepping stones, and that decision has to be your decision. And you generally, it says, you just have to adjust your attitude to whatever you're facing and decide how you want to view it. So then I decided, okay, well, stepping stones, there'll be, there won't be obstacles, there'll be stepping stones, they'll be challenging, but stepping stones. So I shall step on these, hills and mountains to actually see better, where I want to go. So those are things that are very helpful. So indeed, also the support I had was incredible. There was also, I had a very interesting relationship with the nurses in the unit where I was training. Of course, in Pretoria, where it's stiff because there is a neurosurgery ICU. And you have a close relationship with the nurses because you're always working with them. When you're on call there. And those ladies, many of them had, of course, been very smart people in their own right. But because of times, that they found themselves in, they did not realize certain things for themselves. So they saw maybe a mini themselves in me, when I was actually doing well in the program. And they literally almost like cheered me on, So I continued to have someone who is saying I'm a genius. Yeah. Even as I'm training, and someone who is seeing the possibilities for me, they and they were very genuine and caring and wanted me to win, and that's the thing, and I say this sometimes to some of my mentees that there are always more people who want you to win than not. Trust me, there are many more, but the problem is that the ones whom you perceive don't want you to win, their voices are louder in your head. And you need to silence those voices, and allow the other voices that are urging you on, that are seeing positive and possibilities for you. You allow those voices to be louder, and unfortunately, silencing those voices also then comes, from within, you now have to dig deep, So yeah, there are moments when you dig deep, there are moments where you cried, and then when times are tough, I would cry, I just would never cry in the department. I would go and cry at home, I would go and cry at home, never would cry in the department because, you almost like, you can't see me like that, But I do hope, though, that in future we will have a medicine that is softer, that allows a person to break down. I only broke down once. That was to do with a patient. It was actually coincidentally the night of the passing away of River. I was on call that night, and literally when my colleagues find me in a state, they think that I had not even heard the news, But I was on call that night, and I had a very tough night. A small child that I treated who didn't make it, a little baby who was stabbed by their uncle, who I think had gone, had lost his senses to a certain extent. So that was tough. I think that was the only first and the only day where I cried at work. I wanted to go into theater, and I went into theater, but I was such a mess crying in theater, and I was like, no, I think I should go home. So yeah, those are moments which are tough, but.
Indeed, and you're not the only one who has these tough moments, because just last week I was speaking to a friend who is currently in training and was telling me that, look, the first week I was there, I was literally just struggling to come to terms with everything. But thereafter, he says, he got on with the memo. So how do you then stay positive, especially in those times where everything around you at work seems to be quite dark, so to speak, negative, scary? Unfortunate in some ways? How do you then stay positive moving forward from that point?
You keep your eyes on the goal. You just keep your eyes on the goal and what you want to achieve. And you continue to imagine what this outcome is going to be. You just continue to play that in your mind, that at the end, this is where we are going. My aunt, the same one who said I'm a genius for counting to 100, said sometime, she sadly passed away in 2011 in an accident, but just shortly before that, we were having tea with her. And she says to me, humans sometimes can be very odd, we're supposed to be cleverer than animals. But here we are, we get distracted easily, we lose our focus on the goal very easily. But take a cheetah, and a cheetah wants that particular bug, and it's going to go and kill that particular bug to eat. It couldn't be bothered if there's another bug that struts by saying, look at me, how yummy I am, another bug with a cherry on top of it. It couldn't be bothered about any of them. If it has decided on bug C, it is going for bug C, despite all the other bugs that are in the journey. So literally, and she would say to me, then she says to me at the end of that conversation, like a cheetah behind your goals. Be like a cheetah behind your goals. And you literally just have to try and, blind your eyes and silence the noise and just keep going, I one of the things I enjoy is run. I'm not running right now because I've got an injury. But that has been very, instrumental in anything that I have achieved. The knowledge from running has been very, very useful. And I made you the example of going up a hill,
Right.
It's because I know, I'm
Related, but you're doing it all the time.
I know, it's up a hill. The distance is, already being felt by the muscles, but the joy you're going to experience at the end, when you've achieved, and that helps because literally I have almost a daily reinforcement that despite the pain you're going through now, on the other end, at the end of the 10 kilometers, it is going to be nice. It is going to be achievement. It is, the mood is going to be great, So that's how I approach things. And I think that I should not be running, I think, at this point, because I think, I've had like recurrent injuries, but I just keep going back to it because it's one of the things that keep me sane, and just reminds me and gives me context, in general in life.
Yeah, that's true. I'm glad running is that habit for you. It also does work magic for me from time to time when I do that. And, you speak about that analogy that you use there about the cheetah. Some of the distractions in the field are not just literally what you're dealing with in terms of like patients and stuff, but also just in terms of the bureaucracy or maybe call it the body politic of the industry, which comes with some level of discrimination that you've sort of identified over some time. I'm just want to notice in most of your conversations, you're very open about this, and you've made it quite clear, making people aware of some of the things imbalances that are in the industry, in the field. Do you think it's very important for leaders to vocalize what they see in their own industries as they operate?
Look, what we don't talk about, we will never accept. And for me, some things start off with conversations. I am, of course, very vocal about the challenges of women in the field, particularly the challenges of being a Black woman in the field, and some of the things that you encounter and you go through. And if we don't talk about these things, we're never going to address them. Because they're always, we can pretend. If we don't talk about it, we're going to start pretending that they're not there. We're going to start pretending that all is, rosy, for everybody. But it is not the case. And there are people who have fallen through the road because of these particular issues that sometimes we don't want to raise or we don't want to face. And as we talk about these things, we learn a little bit, we learn a little bit ourselves, and also some of the people who are, I would say, perpetrators of some of the injustices. But also the policymakers start listening. And they start, doing their own research and start adjusting policies to ensure that these things are not normalized. These discriminations are not normalized in the spaces that they're in. I've spoken about my own encounter of discrimination when I was at UP, but with everything that had happened at that time, and the leadership of the hospital and their response to it was everything, But had we not been having these conversations beforehand, I might have been dismissed as, look, she's just being emotional, which is the usual thing that is usually said to us women. She's just being emotional. She's overreacting, and all of that. But to get a call from the CEO of the hospital who then says to you, I'm sorry that you experienced that in our hospital, and that for me spoke, volumes. The CEO and the head of HR, acknowledging that should not be happening. You should not experience such within our hospital. It means that we have dropped the ball somewhere, and therefore we ought to fix it. And there must be recourse for you. And of course, how they then carried on and how they intervened and solved the situation spoke to their commitment to it. And I'm almost certain that had these things not been spoken about in the past, not been acknowledged as existing problems, and then a recognition from the hospitals and the departments to say, we are going to change it. If that had not happened, nothing, I would not have had any empathy. I would have been dismissed. I might actually have quit. And I might actually not have achieved my goal, because some things are real, there are deal breakers for all of us. We've got deal breakers, and, that for me was one of the things that are deal breakers that no, actually, I cannot work and cannot train and continue within this environment.
Yeah. Certainly brave, I got to tell you. I mean, and courageous you were at the time. But also, there's a sense of people hesitating to speak out. Leaders sometimes a little bit on the back foot when it comes to vocalizing what they do see. How did you then, get through all of that, knowing that could potentially be the case? In your case, it wasn't really that. But I guess somebody listening might think, hey, I'm scared to speak out because I might just be pushed in a corner and get a little punishment later.
Look, actually, in the long run, there was some isolation at the end of the whole process for me from some colleagues. But you have to decide, for yourself. One, you must choose your battles and choose them well. One of the things I don't tackle things I'm not sure I'm going to win. Some things you're gonna just have to, bite the bullet, and swallow however bitter it is. But you need to select your battles so that you're not fighting all the time, because that also is not good for your own the perception that everyone will have of you, and that is not good for your career in the long run. But you are spot on that there are industry punishments, that come with being vocal. Even in my, as vocal as I am, there are things I'm still, I go gently on. There are things that I sometimes decide to look away. Because I know one thing, you can't fix the world. You can't fix the world. You must choose what is important to you, and go for that.
You are truly striking me like a very determined, I've mentioned you're very courageous, brave, and you're quite adamant about what you want to go for. You just mentioned that you're quite selective in what battles you do pick. But I'm not going to miss the fact that I also pick up you're very patient as well in your approach. So how have you also been able to stay patient? Because sometimes it's easy as a leader to just lose a sense of patience and just, get lost in the whole process. But, you seem to be quite a patient doctor.
Yeah, that for me, it's interesting because inherently, I never thought I have any streak of patience in me. Like I said to you, neurosurgery was considered for the quick results, But life has slowed me down. Growing up has slowed me down to a certain extent. And just knowing that not everybody is going to be the same wavelength as you at every time, And it is important to me to win hearts and minds, and move, You may have these ambitions, It's something that's always very fascinating. I work with my younger brother who has trained in the field of business. And how we get to the same outcome, very different, He starts off, with the possibility, and then he is thinking about the obstructions along the way. On the other hand, I'm a person who follows step 1, step 2. His is chaotic. I'm a person who then follows step 1, step 2, step 3. But I have learned to actually accept chaos because, unfortunately, things are not always going to be, following step 1, step 2, step 3. Sometimes step 4 is going to go ahead of step 1, of step 3. So it has the patience has actually grown. Something that I've developed, over time, but also just by being an observer as well. I think that with time, I have learned to observe more, and sometimes not say much, and just, learn from the situation and the place that I'm finding myself. So reading the room, I've got that on lockdown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, you've probably been reading me the whole time whilst we've been speaking. But you mentioned something very fascinating about, people who've been torchbearers, and you've also mentioned that you're also mentoring people, you also help people in that fashion. How important is it for leaders to also pay it forward in that sense to take it further to those who they can give back to?
Look, and I do it, mostly because I always look back and reflect on my own experience traveling this journey. It was lonely. It was lonely. There are things and places that I could have gotten to quicker, had I had someone else showing me this, the way, and showing you how you can master and use your time efficiently in the field. So I wanted then for the next generation and anyone else that I interact with, I would like the experience to be different. Can they achieve more than what I have achieved? Can they, fulfill and see for themselves bigger things? And yet again, it goes back to my very own upbringing. Someone saw these possibilities for me and installed that in my brain that you actually can do these things. And it is then important now, to continue to show possibilities for other people in their lives, for their own lives, to say, look, you can do this, In fact, you are so good at what you do, you actually can be at this level. And that's really leadership, If you do not, rally your troops, because most of the people that I mentor are young, mostly Black and mostly women, who are getting into the field of the surgical disciplines. And we are going in this thing together, Yes, I'm ahead in career and everything, but I see some things that I'm like, what? I could have done that. I could have achieved that had I had a little bit of a hand, helping me on my way up. So it's very important to me that leaders share of themselves. They share also of the intellectual property that they now have amassed over time. Because really, what are you going to do with all the knowledge that you have? If you're not going to share it with a youngster or with a person who is coming up who wants to do things to achieve something for themselves, you're gonna die with that knowledge bank in your brain. Why do you want that? Don't you just want to leave that behind and just share it as much as possible, until it's exhausted,
Yeah, speaking of knowledge, where you got a lot of your knowledge at the University of Pretoria,
Yeah.
I want to take you down memory lane for a little bit, which is my final question.
Yeah.
Is what is that one thing about the University of Pretoria, your time here, that certainly you would say, I won't forget this one?
Jeez, it was the toughest time of my life, eh? It was the toughest time of my life. But this is now when you start seeing that the good and bad can coexist, and you can come out with something beautiful out of it all. It was, of course, my first time living in Gauteng. I was not familiar with the space. I learned different languages. I was then, because as a medic, it's always important to be able to interact with the patients in the language that they understand. And I come out of here proper multilingual, and that for me was one of the greatest things, So generally, tax and being in this space, one, it really toughened me up, I think that generally tax people are tough, it toughened me up, but also it was such an important and a very significant growth, in my own life, just seeing life and seeing how one can actually succeed despite the odds, So yeah, that was the part of the learnings, and of course, the fact that it's such a good sports university as well was very useful, because then I had to get some fitness, get some cardio going. You can't be an unfit neurosurgeon from tax. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
That's awesome. Dr. Mfundisi, thank you so much for joining us today on the LeadUP podcast. You've shared so much, and we've really enjoyed your insights and your stories.
Thank you very much for having me. I had fun. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. That brings us to the end of my conversation with Dr. Coceka Mfundisi. I indeed figured that one of the things you mentioned, that obstacles can also be seen as stepping stones, and that it is important to win hearts and minds in the process. But her advocacy is so inspiring that you can't just stay silent. You got to speak up when you do see discrimination and injustice. Remember to rate and review this podcast if you have a minute, and also to subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you might be listening from. If you've been wondering who's been putting this podcast together, it's the University of Pretoria's Alumna Relations Office. My name is Lennox Vasara, and our production team includes Samantha Castle, Alna Schutz, and our sound engineers behind all this great audio is Louis Kluter Productions. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Do remember to catch the next episode coming your way soon, and also to reflect on those if you've missed any of the previous episodes. Till we meet again, goodbye.